Hey guys, today I'm going to be working on a painting that I've had on my back burner for a while. I've been doing something inspired by Rembrandt himself, one of my absolute favorite painters, master of the chiaroscuro. There's a few things that I had to keep in mind when doing so, and I thought I'd share them with you. If you don't already know who Rembrandt is, it's time that you do, because he is one of the greatest Dutch painters in history, if not in the entire world. In the 1600s, he was an extremely sought-out painter, and he was known for his magnificent paintings as well as his selfies. So there's a few things to note if you're ever trying to learn from Rembrandt's style point, and I had to go over a few of them simply for the painting that I was creating. First and foremost, if you're going to be imitating or borrowing from the master of chiaroscuro himself, Rembrandt, then you do have to incorporate chiaroscuro into your paintings. So what that means is to have a very strong contrast of your lights and your darks. And what that does is it helps create the illusion of volume and form in space. With light and dark, you can create depth. Another thing that makes Rembrandt's work stand out particularly is his use of gold, earthy tones. Now the thing is that when Rembrandt was doing his painting, he would often kind of glaze his painting before layering on the thick layers of paint. And he would glaze it with like this warm gold color that would kind of shine through the layers of paint that he would put on over top later. Now, as a digital painter, you can't really do that because you can't really play with the actual mechanics of the paint itself. You have to work with just pixels on a screen. So you can't really achieve that glow that Rembrandt's work had, but you can fake it. So what that means is to make sure that everything kind of has like this warm, almost like it's emitting light type of quality to it. And you can do that with different layer effects, as well as making sure that you are constantly applying that layer throughout your painting process so it doesn't get lost while you are painting over top. Key colors that Rembrandt used in his paintings are things like yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber, white, black, and like this really deep orangey red. However, he really never used these as straight pigments. He would mix them up and combine them. So as a digital painter, what I have to do when I'm imitating Rembrandt is I have to make sure that I'm constantly combining these types of colors, and I'm not getting too far down the path, but I'm also not going straight from the tube either. Something else that Rembrandt really liked to do was fill the grooves of his painting, because remember, he was a physical painter, which meant that the paint actually had like elements and facets to it, much like the topography of like a mountain region. So what he liked to do was he liked to paint something over top of a dried layer and then wipe it off so that the only remaining parts of that pigment were in the deep crevices of the paint. Now, as a digital painter, I cannot do that, which means that I have to painstakingly go through and imitate that effect by hand. Another thing about Rembrandt is that we think he always started with like a gray or a brown canvas base, and then he glazed over top of that with a really rich gold color. It's a method called imprimatura. It was this imprimatura method which actually helped make his paintings seem to be lit from within, because as he painted over top, you could still catch the glint of light that was trapped in the glaze. And this is what made it have its luminance. Something that was extremely striking considering he often painted in dark shadow with a very stark light contrast. Now, one more thing to note with Rembrandt's stylistic choices is he was known for doing careless painting. So he was able to make something look like it was done with ease, even though it was like very meticulously planned out. For example, the way that he did noses and mouths tended to be very almost simple. But then you would see him do things like pay a lot of attention to the folds or wrinkles around the eyes. And for Rembrandt, he would choose to render the eyes a lot, but not so much the nose or the mouth. So he would pick his poison on the face as to be the focal feature that brought you in. And since the eyes are the window to the soul, and they helped make that little triangular point on the face between the nose and the eyes, it drew you into the person's expression. So of course, I have to pay a lot of attention to the eyes, which can be difficult in this particular painting I'm doing because the eyes are in shadow. So instead, I'm paying a lot of attention to the folds around the mouth. Not the mouth itself. The mouth itself is actually quite simplistic, but the folds around the mouth, the volume of the skin around the mouth, I pay attention to, because Rembrandt was able to do that with the thickness of his paints, as well as using the chiaroscuro techniques that Rembrandt used to achieve the volume of his form. Now, Rembrandt also really liked to use this technique where he would very kind of messily do hair. Like, he wouldn't render hair the way some artists did, where they would be very painstakingly strand by strand painted in. Instead, what he did was he would kind of like paint the mass, and then he would imply the brush strokes of hair by actually scraping off the paint with the back of the brush. So keeping everything like that in mind, I'm making sure I'm using a very warm, earthy, golden hue when it comes to the actual entire painting color. I'm also trying to stick to browns and reds and golds and yellows as much as I can. Specifically ones that seem very similar to like a yellow ochre or a burnt umber or a burnt sienna. The more in shadow things get, the less detail they have, and the more blurry things get. The lost and found edges are extremely important for Rembrandt's paintings, and since he loved to paint in chiaroscuro, what happens is that the large portion in shadow becomes almost implied, and then the part in light becomes hyper detailed. So again, I'm using the color scheme. I am trying to imitate as much as I can the art of imprimatura, which is incredibly difficult being a digital painter. I'm being very simplistic when it comes to the nose and the line of the mouth, but I am going to be paying quite a bit of attention to the eyes as well as the corners of the mouth. I have now shown you how I would approach taking a Rembrandt painting and imitating that in a digital method. If you guys liked my video or found it useful and enjoyed seeing my process of taking a very traditional look and applying it with a digital means, then please leave a like and a thumbs up. It is a bit more painstaking, there are details that you have to try to replicate, and it's a lot more difficult to do digitally than it is to do traditionally, but in the end I actually enjoy the process and I think it's worth it. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button, and I will see you next week.